Welcome to Shop Talk Live, Fine Woodworking Magazine's bi-weekly podcast. I'm your host and Fine Woodworking editor, Tom McKenna, and with me today are Regulars Executive Art Director, Mike Pekovich.
Gentlemen.
And Special Projects Editor, Matt Kenny.
Hey, guys.
How are we?
Good.
Pretty good.
Well, before we get started, I need to take care of some housekeeping. Don't forget to check our website to keep up with our exciting tool giveaway for Fine Woodworking's 40th anniversary. We have 40 great tool prizes, but they change regularly, and you have to enter for each one. The current prize is a rigid benchtop spindle/belt sander. To enter to win that, go to finewoodworking.com/40 sweeps. That's the number 40. And for this prize, you have to enter by Monday, February 1st.
That's an awesome tool. I would like that.
It's awesome.
Where is that? Is that in your office?
No, it's at the manufacturer, unfortunately. Okay. No, we didn't. We have one down in our shop that we purchased years ago, but I think we need an upgrade.
Definitely one of the all-time favorite tools of all time.
Yeah, that is a great,
Yes.
great tool.
Yeah, for $200, it's a great value. Anyway, hey, this month we will be giving a prize away every week, so stay in touch with that website to keep up with what is being offered.
I have a question about this sweepstakes. If I can make 52 boxes in 52 weeks, why can't we give away 52 prizes in 52 weeks? What's up with 40 prizes? Oh, 40th anniversary.
40th anniversary, man. Come on, get with the program. Anyway,
Are
finally,
you suggesting we give away 52 boxes in 52 weeks?
Yes.
That's special projects for you. Finally, you can keep up with Fine Woodworking on Instagram and on Facebook, and you can look for Matt, Mike, and me on Instagram as well and see what we're doing in our shops. To begin this week, I wanted to talk to Matt a little bit. He was just down in Colonial Williamsburg for their conference on woodworking in the 18th century, so I figured I'd let him chat with us about what happened aside from lots of puffy shirts.
Well, actually, there were no puffy. Well, there were a few puffy shirts. There actually were, and a few, culottes and.
What's a culotte?
Those little knee breeches that they wore back then.
Matt knows all these technical terms for these weird apparel things.
So this was my fourth time at the Working Wood in the 18th Century Conference, which we happened to co-sponsor. And we've co-sponsored it ever since it started, right?
Yeah, I think 17 years.
It's 17 or 18, yeah. And this year, so each year they organize the conference around a particular theme. One year I went, it was about the furniture at Mount Vernon. This year it was about furniture related to leisure time or leisure time. And so one of the things that was made and discussed by Corey Loftheim, who is the master cabinet maker in the Hay Cabinet Shop at Colonial Williamsburg, he made a easy chair. And upholstered easy chair. So Corey demonstrated some of the joinery and some of the turning involved in that. And he had a frame of one that was already completed, so he could put it together very quickly on stage. And he did that one morning. And then the next morning, they had one of Colonial Williamsburg's upholsterers come in and show how he was able to look at the original that this was based on, which they have in the collection there. And he was able to look at nail holes and nail hole patterns and figure out how this thing was upholstered.
Awesome.
And so then they had a video showing him upholstering, and they showed that while Corey and this man, his name is Leroy. I can't remember his last name, but they talked about what was going on in the video. And Alf Sharp was there, who is a former cartouche winner. Mm-hmm. Or he's still a cartouche winner. He won it previously, and he showed how to make a Philadelphia gaming table, and other things were done. One of the things I always look forward to is a guy named Ted Boscana, who is from the Williamsburg joiner's shop, which is sort of like carpentry, and he showed how he demonstrated roofing a gazebo.
Oh, awesome.
Wow.
which was really cool. And other people from Colonial Williamsburg also did some things. The other two guys from the Hay Shop, Bill Pavlik and Brian Weldy, each demonstrated. Bill was doing a music stand, and Brian was showing how he and a Cooper, one of the Coopers from Williamsburg, were showing how this Coopered cooler was made. So it was like
Wow.
a wooden ice bucket
Okay.
to
Nice.
I don't know what they were cooling.
Buckets
back
of
then.
leisure.
Yeah, buckets of. It wasn't Bud Light or Rolling Rock, that's for sure. But so that was cool, and it takes place over like 2.5 days, and they do 2 sessions each year. And I went to the session for the Society of American Period Furniture Makers, or SAPFM, although some guys were calling it SAP FM, which sounds like a radio station. And so most of the people there belong to SAPFM, and one of the nights was the Cartouche Banquet, when they awarded the Cartouche Award to this year's winner, which was a gentleman named Ronnie Young from Tennessee, who did really impressive, very impressive work. And he had a great talk about his work and sort of his history, how he got started in woodworking. And it was really fascinating and interesting. And it's always a good time. I really enjoy going there.
I mean, what always impresses me, and when I've gone and given the speech at the banquet, it's a short little speech, but I'm always impressed by the makers, the guys getting up on stage and doing what they do in front of 180, 200 people, and they're just great woodworkers. I mean, it's a really amazing work to see, and that's one of the things that fascinates me. And they do it in a pretty entertaining fashion too.
Yeah, almost all of them are great woodworkers.
Yes.
And I say this because I went to the conference once, and it was back when I just started. I don't even think I was teaching a lot. I was maybe demonstrating here and there at a Lee Nielsen show or woodworking show or something. Here's how to sharpen a plain iron. And Asa, the former editor, he sat me down and said, "Mike, I volunteered you to demonstrate."
Oh, I remember. Yeah, he did the same thing to me.
Between like the official lectures in the lecture hall and everything, you're going to be out in the lobby while everyone's getting their little Danish and cup of coffee. You're going to be there at a workbench demonstrating. It's like, wow.
Yeah, why?
That does not sound like a good idea. But, I was a trooper. I took all my stuff down there, set up at a bench, did some dovetails and sharpening. And you mentioned the gentleman who's the head of the hay shop, Corey.
Corey Loftheim is now, yeah.
Yeah, he was sort of at a bench kind of across from me, and he was kind of looking at me like,
What are you doing?
who are you? Why are you here? And I honestly...
How did you get into my house?
I had no idea what I was saying. It was very uncomfortable. I mean, people were very generous and it was fine, but it was probably one of the most uncomfortable moments of my life. And so when I said that not everyone is a fantastic woodworker, me at the time probably should have been watching instead of talking.
Asa had me do the same thing at the next session that year, and it was tremendously uncomfortable because it was like...
And you're right in the, when you walk into the museum heading toward the auditorium, the bench that you guys were demonstrating at is right at the entrance.
Oh,
so everyone has to walk past you. And
welcome.
You guys are like the only ones not wearing puffy shirts probably doing the demo.
Well, it was more uncomfortable, not because neither Mike nor I are bad woodworkers or because we can't instruct people, but because we shouldn't have been doing it there.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. I hope Ace is not listening to this.
I hope he is.
But it's always fantastic. And they always have at least one person from the outside. Dan Faya was there one year. Phil Lowe was there one year, which was so amazing to watch Phil work and really work because he's so efficient and fast and good.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the first year
Steve Latta was there one year.
Yeah, he was there. Was it last year? No, 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
The first year I went, I think it was Roy Underhill was there, and they were doing some big turnings, and they had an old kind of hand-powered lathe up there, and it was fun. Like people were lining up to get up on stage to churn this big wheel.
That was that was like 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, Steve Latta and he were there the same year, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, Andrew Hunter was there one year.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
it's a good time. I mean, it's a great hotel, lots of good restaurants, lots to see. The museum itself is just spectacular. It's just, to me, it's all around fun.
Yeah. It's once a year in January.
Yep.
And every year in January, and there's 2 sessions, and one of them is normally the meeting where the SatFM guys meet, but you do not have to be a member of SatFM to go to that session.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, let's move on to some real business and get to some questions. This one comes from Andrew Potvin. And Andrew writes, I am constantly having trouble getting my table saw to be level and not wobble on a very uneven concrete floor. How can I get my table saw to be stable? And one of the things that he wants to do is ultimately get his workbench in line with the table saw so he has an outfeed surface. So, that level is an important quality for him.
all right. Well, I have a similar problem in my shop. Not that my floor isn't level necessarily. It's not like it's hilly, but rather that it has a very severe slope in it. I think that the former owners used it as an abattoir, perhaps.
What?
Yeah, look it up later, boys.
We'll have to have Ben put that definition on the website for us.
An abattoir. Anyways, so all of my stuff kind of has like a cant to it. It kind of slopes down towards the garage doors.
So you can like hose it out and
So you
everything
can-
drains out.
Right.
the garage.
No, it's an
Right.
advantage because you're always working downhill.
That's right. Thank you, Tom. But when I got my new bandsaw, I didn't want that to be sloped like that. So what I did was made a large platform and used sort of 2x4 sleepers that I cut an angle onto to level out, to counteract the slope of the floor, and then screwed down a large piece of plywood to that. So there's a large platform that my table saw, my bandsaw is on, and there's also big enough for me to stand on while I'm using my bandsaw.
Right.
And he could do something similar for his table saw, and one day his big enough for his outfeed table bench, just make a very large platform. You might need to make it 8x8, 2 sheets of plywood.
Right.
Depending on your, I don't know if he has a 52-inch fence, a 30-inch fence, whatever. But make it large enough for you to stand on, for the entire table saw to be on, and for your workbench to be on one day. And I would guess you'd want to have a space for you to stand at while you're using it at your workbench. That's, so in other words, instead of trying to wedge things here and there and all that, just level out the whole floor by making this low platform that everything fits on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could even take it to the next level. I mean, basically, I suffered through a garage shop with a really uneven, cracked, beat-up concrete floor. Same issues, and I, eventually ended up doing what you did, Matt, but did the entire floor. I just did a insulated plywood floor across the whole garage, and it really, the hardest thing about it was just sort of moving stuff out of the way in order to do it. I sort of did it in halves. I moved all the equipment to one side, did half the floor, got a buddy to sort of lift things up to the plywood floor and to the other side, but it was like a weekend job. It seems like a big thing, but I did the plywood 2x4s flat on the ground, so it gave maybe about like 1.5 inches of airspace. And the coolest thing is I went to Home Depot and I got to rent one of those sort of like cartridge activated nailer things.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, so I was like firing nails like every 6 inches on these studs into the concrete. And then I got some rigid insulation, cut it and laid that between the sleepers, and then just 3/4 inch plywood on top. And it worked really well. I still like it. And plus, it's so much more comfortable to work on a wood floor.
Yes, it is.
It's easier on your feet, your back. If you drop a chisel, you're not like sticking your foot out to try to catch it with your foot instead of having it hit the concrete.
That's for later smooth moves. I guess I'm lucky. I work in my basement, and I don't have any really huge leveling problems, so I had a good pour, I guess.
Cool.
Well, a basement floor should be poured level. I mean, it's not uncommon for garage floors to be sloped.
Well, they do it
towards
too.
Right.
Drainage.
Most time. Mine, I didn't level it overall like yours. I'm sure it was sloped a little bit, but it wasn't enough for me to do anything about that overall.
Yeah, the reason I did not do a whole floor yet, which I would like to do, is because I would like it to be level, but that means, so I would probably, floor about 25 to 30 feet length of, from front to back.
Right.
And I think it's like a 6-inch or a 4 to 6 inch rise over,
Wow.
Slope. So I would have to really make some tall sleepers, like basically making floor joists.
Yeah.
So I've been avoiding doing that because ultimately I just like not to be in my garage.
Right.
Yeah, that's a pretty extreme slope.
Yeah, it is.
But your lot is pretty. You're on kind of a hill, so
right.
the owners probably needed that slope.
It's also why all my furniture kind of leans over to one side.
Looks great in the garage.
Yeah, it was level in the garage.
All right, let's move on. The next question comes from Adam Wellner. And Adam writes, I've heard some general advice of get the biggest tool you can afford so you don't need to upgrade later. But what are your thoughts on getting a better, and he means more highly reviewed machine versus a bigger but still well-reviewed machine at a similar price? For example, looking at a high-end contractor saw is similar in price to some well-reviewed hybrid best value table saws, which have larger motors. The same is true of 14-inch versus 18-inch bandsaws. What are your thoughts? And we chatted a little bit about this yesterday. Matt had some interesting concepts, as always.
So I think actually you can't answer this question for all machinery.
Yeah, I think it depends on the machine.
Yeah. So I thought, for example, with the table saw, a contractor if I had the choice of buying a contractor saw or a cabinet saw style hybrid,
right,
in which the trunnions and all that assembly are attached to the base rather than to the tabletop of the saw,
right,
any given day I would take the cabinet style hybrid saw.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
because there are inherent problems with the design of a contractor saw that some saws maybe overcome them, but generally there are problems with them, and one of them is making adjustments to parallel, blade to slot parallelism and things like that. So I think in that case, I would always take the best value cabinet style saw as opposed to the more expensive, supposedly higher end contractor saw.
Or the best overall contractor saw.
The best overall, yeah. So, but that's that particular machine. I think with band saws, it's a different story.
Well, let's go back to the contractor saw for just a sec. The main difference between the two, and you talked about the ease of getting your blade set up, has to do with the trunnion or sort of the blade mechanism. On contractor saws, it's attached to the underside of the tabletop, right, where on a cabinet style saw, it's attached to the cabinet.
Yes.
Also, you have a cabinet which collects the dust and makes it easier to get dust collection. But let me throw this at you because I'm not sure about the answer for this. Mentioned contractor saw. What about like a saw stop contractor saw versus a different brand of hybrid saw, which is obviously you're going to get more saw, you have the cabinet, maybe more horsepower. Where do you go there?
Well, you're
to the bank.
Yeah. So first of all, we're no longer talking about best value cabinet saws anymore because the saw stop contractor saw, I believe, is around $1,600.
Well, we're talking about best overall contractor, which would probably be a saw stop.
Yes.
That'd be all the most expensive.
That's what I mean.
Right.
So that's about $1,600.
Sure.
So now you're no longer talking about best value cabinet saw. You can move up, and I don't know if you have to pay shipping for the contractor style saw stop or not. You may not. If you do, then you're talking about $2,000 or something. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I still think I go with cabinet saw.
Without the little safety technology there.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. But if you're talking, once yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
for
I
me.
think part of it probably depends on how often and what you're using your table saw for. Since I've gotten a better bandsaw, I'm using my table saw less. And I have one of those nasty contractor saws. It's fine, but it has the inherent problems that Matt talked about. And one of the big things for me is the dust, it has that big open end, and it has a dust port underneath, but
Right.
it does no good because I've got a big flapping door on the back end that stays open all the time.
Yeah,
So,
but I will say that the saw stop contractor saw was a very good saw. It did very well when we tested it, and also when Home Building tested it. So it would be hard it would be a hard choice.
Yeah, I think what makes it hard is a purchase like that you're going to live with for a really long time.
right.
And
So,
see, I don't think
you're
I've
not
got a
gonna upgrade
contractor
to that.
saw knowing that.
And for the same thing, I've got a Delta Unisaw, so I've worked for 30 years without flesh sensing technology. I've got all 10 fingers. That said, today, right now, that said, and I know we're sometimes accused of sort of, pushing saw stop or whatever, or any particular brand, but it works so well. And it really will keep you from cutting your fingers off at the table saw.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine. I would really like to upgrade my saw. I still haven't done it, but if I were investing in a saw, it would be really hard for me to, number one, have to live with a contractor saw for a long time. Number two, have to live without a flesh sensing technology in a saw for a really long time. So, to Tom's point, it's an investment. I think it's an investment you need to make. So even if you go for a hybrid saw, spend a little bit more money.
Get the saw
I
stop
would
version.
personally would.
Yes.
And I would feel, and then that's a saw, even though it might not have the power I would like in the long run. You can do a lot of really good work in a home shop with something like that.
Yeah.
For a really long time. So
Yeah, and it's hard for when it gets to contractor saw. It's easy for me to say I will not buy a contractor saw. I'll save up and get the extra, get the next up saw stop or something.
Yeah.
Right. But then you have to keep in mind that for me, it's the money that I use to buy tools is money that I get from teaching or selling furniture or in boxes.
Right.
So it's not coming out of our primary income. So it's a little easier for me to say, well, I'm just going to save up and I'll teach an extra class, or I'll really work hard to try to sell some more boxes this year.
yeah, the kids are just going to wear these shoes for another year.
Yeah, they're just not going to eat, fresh milk for a year or two.
Well, they can skim the chunks off, right?
Yes, but bandsaws I think are a completely different topic.
Yeah.
I do think that you would be better off getting a high-end 14-inch bandsaw with, like a European style frame, the steel frames with good guides,
Tall fence.
tall fence, short fence option. The fences that are tall and short, that have drift, that can adjust for drift, that have good guides, that have a strong post, and have a little bit larger motor, and like a 12-inch resaw capacity, as opposed to buying a lower end like 18-inch bandsaw. I would probably do that. And you could look at, we've tested 14s and 18, sort of that range recent in the last couple of years, and you can look at that and say, okay, I can either get the best overall 14-inch bandsaw from that test, or the best value from this test.
Right. And traditionally, the knock on the 14-inch saw, which I had the Delta 14-inch for a long time, it was either resaw capacity if you didn't have the riser block, or if you did have a riser block, maybe the resaw, the power for resawing wasn't there. Maybe the guide system wasn't there. The dust collection wasn't there. The ability to do serious resawing was limited on a smaller saw. So it really justified going up to a bigger saw because you're going to get a lot more features. So, but now I think you said the new breed of the smaller saws can tackle the big jobs as well as going to a saw with bigger wheels. But that said, I do have a lower price, bigger saw. I love it. Tom, you have a higher price, smaller saw.
I do.
You're happy with that guy.
Yeah, but I also, I'm stepping up from a low-end functional 14-inch bandsaw that, didn't have a riser block. It had that old cast iron frame with an open base, but
it functioned really well as a anchor.
no, it was fine for curves, but, there's no way I could do any, serious resawing. And just in terms of the guides and the features and everything, it's just... it's like doing my own tool review where I suddenly have this aha moment, and it's like, this is what I've been missing all my career here.
Yeah, I mean,
a great bandsaw.
I bought a larger bandsaw based on the recommendations of Raleigh Johnson. It was like the best overall, I think, in the last time we did big bandsaws. It's the Grizzly
You have
19
the 19
inch.
inch, right? I have the 17 inch.
Fantastic saw, great saw. It was like $1,700-$1,800, And if I were to do it over again now, I might be tempted to get the 14 inch that was best overall the last time we did them. The Laguna,
the 1412.
yeah,
Which is also the best value.
yes,
And the Powermatic was the other winner.
was the best overall,
right.
yeah, but is about twice the money, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but to be honest, we're talking about this, but what I'm actually thinking in the back of my head now, and I have been for a while, is that I like that Grizzly. Honestly, I wish I would have gotten like a Mini Max 16-inch bandsaw. Something a little bit beefier, a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger motor, and that's sort of in the back of my head that I'm going to sell my bandsaw and move up to like a Mini Max 16, which has a higher, more resaw capacity, and is a little more of an industrial machine as opposed to a home shop machine.
Well, I heard that Ben Strano is looking for a bandsaw.
Is he? maybe he'll pay me $2,500 for my bandsaw.
Best thing about new staffers is you can, everybody moves up a notch on their equipment.
That's right.
All right. Well, let's move on to, let me see if I can get this right now. Let's talk about our all-time favorite technique of all time for this week. Mike?
This is actually a brand new technique. Not really. It's an old technique that I've sort of put to a different use. I was teaching a design class this weekend at Connecticut Valley. It went really well. And I've done drawing, sketching, scale drawings, scale mock-ups. But in this class over 2 days, I wanted to move up to a full-size mock-up to sort of get to that point right before you're ready to build. It's like, I wanted to go through the design process all the way up until you're ready to drop a full-size plan or whatever you need to do. And I thought the final mock-up was really the missing link in this. And so I didn't want everyone having to build like a giant piece of furniture. I wanted something that was doable. So I came up with the last task was to do like a small nightstand, end table, cabinet, whatever you wanted. And I got the idea from watching Steve Latta and Bob Van Dyke, who whenever they're laying out veneers for tabletops and that kind of stuff, Bob has this little pair of mirrors that are hinged together, 12 by 12 mirror. You put it on a piece of veneer, and the way you angle the mirrors, you can sort of get a preview of what this veneer is going to look like when it's subdivided at different angles and such. And then Bob was using the same thing. He was testing out different little inlay details on a table he was making, a small table. So he would take a corner of a table and come up with an inlay design, put the corner of the table on the finished base, put the mirror on top of this corner, and it gave you a full-size top sitting on top of the table, overhangs, 4 different corners. And it worked really, really well. So I thought, what if we kick that idea up a notch further, get some bigger mirrors? I think we got like 36 by 24 mirrors, 2 of them, taped them together, put them on the floor. And that way it allowed us to make a little quarter of a full-size mock-up for a table that we could stick into the corner of these mirrors. And I really didn't know if this was going to work or not. And but we got it together. I got my little corner table and I put it in the little corner of the mirrors, and it was like magic. It was like a whole full piece of furniture.
Yeah, I saw the quick video you shot of it, and it was amazing.
Yeah, so I did a really quick post on my Instagram account where putting this little quarter table into the mirror, and bam, there's like a whole piece of furniture. I mean, I did one leg in one corner, 2 aprons, 2 half aprons, 1 leg, and a quarter of a top. And you put it in there, and you literally see the whole thing, and you see the leg in 4 different positions, exactly right. And it's like, why have I never done this before? And Ben Strano, who was taking the class with me, he tried this out, and we were looking at his little table, and we were thinking, the legs are maybe just a little too long. You probably want to cut 1 inch off those legs. And Ben was thinking, great. I got to cut 1 inch off 4 legs. And I'm kind of thinking the same thing. And he takes the mock-up away from the mirrors. He goes, oh, no, I just have to cut off one leg. He's like, oh, of course. So it worked out really well. So the whole doing a quarter full-size mock-up, stick it in a hinged mirror, and you got like the whole thing. And it was like really, really cool. Worked fantastic.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I thought you got that idea from your dressing room where you check out your Carhartt ensembles each morning before you come to work.
Well, I do that.
Is it my turn now?
Yeah, what the heck?
Okay. My is something I came up with. I'm sure other people have done it though. To route some dados in a little tea box that I'm making right now, which has some dividers in it to create a space for a door and some drawers.
Yeah, this isn't a box as much as a case, like a little.
It's
case
a small
piece.
case piece. Yeah, it's a very small case piece, or a very large box, but it is a box. Let's not.
No, fair enough.
We're not questioning
Sure.
that. We're not
Yes.
questioning that. Normally, when I would do that, I would start off with two pieces, like two sides that are the same length, and I would set up my router table so I could do stop dados. And that works because the two parts are the same length, and as long as you register the same end of each piece off the fence, those dados end up exactly perfectly aligned.
Yes.
So that when you slide that divider in later, it's square to the parts. Mm-hmm. Well, with this case piece, this box rather, the pieces that needed to be, like the opposing pieces that needed the dados were not the same length, because one of them was the top of the case, one of them was a divider in the case, and then one of them was the side, and then one of them was a vertical divider.
Okay.
So they weren't all the same length. And I was like, how am I going to do this? In the past, I've made spacers and try to really accurately dial in the spacer so that I can put that spacer against the fence when I do the shorter part.
Yes.
And still have it come out the same.
Right.
But this time I said this piece is actually big enough on the interior for me to get one of my trim routers in. I have a Porter Cable 310 trim router, which isn't made anymore, but it's very short. It's, and it's really nice. And I got a square base on it. So I said, well, why don't I do this? Why don't I dry assemble, like I glued the case together, the four, case pieces, and then I could dry fit the first divider in there, and then I could route the two dados. And I said, this is cool, what I'm going to do. And then I thought about using the old T-square trick, where
yes.
But I said, I'm a little worried about the T-square thing. So because I didn't know if it would be exactly, because then you still have to mark the two accurately.
Yeah. Yes.
And because if you don't mark them accurately, it doesn't matter how accurate the T-square is.
Right.
So what I did instead was dry fit it, or glued it up, dry fit that first divider in, and cut an MDF spacer that moved my router over to so the bit would route where I wanted to cut.
Yes.
And so I used that spacer on the top of the case by putting it against one side of the case. And then when I had that divider dry fit, I could put that spacer against the same side of the case, and it would move my router over the exact same amount.
Yes.
And then when I routed both of those, they would line up perfectly.
Cool.
And I used that technique for all of the divider dados in the case, and it worked great.
No, nice.
Awesome.
So it's sort of the same technique where you use a board or a piece of MDF to register drawer slides on the interior of a case, but you're just using the router. Awesome.
Yeah, it worked really well.
Cool. Well, mine is a little bit more low tech. I made a bandsaw box out of a log, and when I was making the lid, I was trying to figure out. Hold on. I was trying to figure out how to. I wanted an overhang. I didn't want a knob on or pull on top of the lid. I wanted just a flat thing, and so I needed an overhang to be able to pull the lid off. And I was trying to figure out how best to dial that in, and something twitched in my brain, and I don't know, sometimes these things happen.
Aneurysm.
But I recalled some article that I photographed, and it was a Michael Fortune article, and it was a fundamentals on drawing curves that appeared a few years ago. And what Michael was doing was he would use French curves on his drawings, and when he wanted to space a line out from that curve or that arc, he would use a washer and put the pencil point in the middle of the washer and running along the curve of the French curve. And so I thought,
the washer is rolling along the edge. while you're
exactly,
going.
and spacing the pencil point out from the curve. And so I thought, wow, that should work here. And so I grabbed one of the washers. I had a handful of washers in my tool cabinet, and they never get used. And finally, I found a use for them. And I just experimented, drawing on the top blank, tracing around the curve of the box until I found the right width washer. And then I traced it and cut it out on the bandsaw and refined it by eye. And it was like brilliant.
Very cool.
Wow, that is very, very cool.
Awesome.
So thank you, Michael. And I think that article appeared in issue number 199 in 2008. So thank you again, Michael.
Cool.
That was just prior to the Matt Kinney era.
That's when everything changed.
That's when everything changed in the magazine.
All right. Let's move back to some questions. This one comes from Mike Firestein, and he writes, excuse me, I recently received a fine Japanese Ryoba saw, which is easily the nicest tool that I have. For the time being, my saw is homeless, wrapped in a towel on my bench. I've seen most Japanese saws like this hung on walls, but this tool has no real way to hang it. How can I store and take care of this tool so it lasts me for years? And Matt had some
I get to go
interesting
first.
solutions. Yeah, come on, dive in.
So first of all, he is a little incorrect that there's no way to hang it, because it's a Ryoba saw, which means the handle comes up, and then when it gets to the blade, it actually sort of curves out on each side of the handle and then goes up where the teeth are. So the way these are often hung is that you, instead of having the handle up, you have the blade up, and you can put 2 dowels in the wall or 2 nails in the wall, and just underneath where the blade curves in back into the handle, and that'll hold it up. I've seen them hung that way quite a bit.
How about pegboard? How do you feel about that?
What's pegboard?
I think it says, when he says a fine saw, that can mean a lot of things
Yes.
in relation to Japanese tools. I have what I consider to be, a pretty good quality Japanese dovetail saw, a Dozuki, and but not so fine a quality that I was afraid to drill a hole in the end of the handle so I can hang it from a dowel, because it's it's like a $30 or $40 saw.
Kind of with the replaceable blade.
Yes, but if
Yeah.
you're talking like a handmade, hand-filed, hand-hammered saw from Japan by an individual maker, where you're spending multiple hundreds of dollars, maybe not
Yeah, you
drill
don't.
a hole in the hand.
Because actually that guy will feel it, and he'll come over to the United States, and he will pound you.
I know people that
zen
have
of the
built cases or boxes for their saws,
Yeah.
which is a really elegant solution. I would say you probably just to keep the rust off of it, if you're in a shop that isn't really conditioned well, the saw itself, all my hand tools, I tend to keep in a fairly enclosed case. In my case, it's a tool cabinet or drawers. So if you don't have either of those, I think make a nice little case for it, and just the ritual of pulling out your case and taking your saw out will add to, I think, the user experience of the tool. I see nothing wrong with that. I think it's very valid.
There you go.
If you are going to hang it up, you don't want to drill a hole in anything, or even the dowels. A lot of the tools in my tool cabinet are secured on the bottom by a little shelf, but then also by a magnet to hold them to it. And I don't like the notion of direct magnet to steel contact. So I have strips of wood where I'll bore in from the back with a Forstner bit really close to the surface. I'll glue in a rare earth magnet from the back, attach the little strip to my case, and there's enough magnetism there for the saw or the ruler or my dial caliper to sort of stick to that strip, but still have wood between the steel, in this case, between the steel saw blade and the magnet itself. So get creative, have some fun, figure out a way to hang it up.
I can't believe I didn't think of this already.
Oh, no.
No, what I did, because for my back saws, which I didn't have anywhere to keep in my original tool cabinet, which I still use in my shop, in addition to another one. So on the doors that open up, on the inside of the doors, I made. I took blocks of wood, maybe half inch, 5/8 inch thick, and I used the saw to cut a kerf down into it. And then I just scooped, cut a little notch in the end where so that the handle could fit
the
down
handle
in.
will register to that
Yeah.
to keep it from falling out.
And I just tilt them. They're just kind of canted up a little bit so that I can just stick it in there. And I actually have a little leather strap that comes over and there's a hole in the strap that goes over a nail.
Cool.
But you don't really need that. But it's like you could just
Yeah,
make
little cradle.
that just by cutting it.
Oh, that's cool. And here's another idea: is you don't need to like build like a big giant tool cabinet to like house a tool, especially if you're getting started in your collection. Start with a small cabinet. So maybe a small cabinet to house your saw, maybe some chisels, maybe a couple drawers for knickknacks, and hang that on the wall. And then when you get more tools, build another cabinet and put it next to it.
There you go.
Well, so yeah, what I'm currently doing in my shop for all my stuff is actually making like a Tansu style tool cabinet where there's one box for chisels, one box for this, one box for that, and so you could start doing that.
Yeah, that's great.
Is that going to be part of your 52 boxes?
No.
All right.
Don't be a smart aleck.
Matt Kenny 52 box tool chest.
That's right. That's next year.
Yes.
I'm
52
making
case pieces. by
There's going to
Matt
be
Kenny.
one box for each chisel.
Now that's fancy. All right, let's move on to the next question. This one comes from Andy Coletti, who asks, a little over a year ago, I made a book-matched live-edge walnut table that was about 1 inch thick. I didn't finish the underside. Now there is a sizable bow in it. My first thought was to rip it down the middle and resurface it, but I have a few Dutchmen in the board, and I don't want any tear out. My theory is to attack the top with my my other theory is to attack the top with my orbital sander and remove the finish and then refinish both sides. Please let me know your thoughts. Sounds like a nightmare.
Well, you can get that that 2-part epoxy finish, the kind that you bury seashells and pennies in. And you can just sort of, make
a lake,
duct tape and make a dam around all 4 edges and just fill it till it's level. It's self-leveling.
Yes.
So it would just be dead flat.
It would only take about 8 gallons.
It's like that bar top finish.
Yes. If you didn't want to do that, well, getting back to the question, why is it
cupping?
Why is it cupping? Now, it sounds like his thought was that because one side was finished and one wasn't. That could be. It could also be that if it's live edge, if it wasn't really kiln dried or dry, it could be cupping just because it's sort of getting to its equilibrium moisture content. If you don't want to mess around with finish, and I think I mentioned this solution before, and it's one I mentioned because I actually tried it and it worked pretty well to fix a cup tabletop. And it's really cool because you don't damage the finish on the top. It's where you get a circular saw and some sort of straight edge guide clamped to the bottom and rip some non-through grooves, almost as close to the ends as you can get. I'd say, I think we started 1.5 inches apart, ended up cutting them like 3/4 of an inch apart, starting maybe 2 inches in from each long edge. So we had, 20 or 30 little cuts there. And that releases enough of the tension where you can clamp it flat. And my guess, if it's a live edge top and it's cupping, it means you probably don't have any sort of support system below, like 4 legs and 4 aprons that are really keeping this flat. So you might want to add some cleats.
Yep.
If you get some cleats, do some nice little tapers on the ends so they look nice and they're not really visible from the sides. You could probably clamp this thing flat, screw some cleats along the bottom face to sort of keep it flat, and that might solve the trick. That might solve the problem.
So I just thought about this. If he finished the top, and that would mean that it would probably dry most on the bottom. So what if it's cupping down? See?
Well, no, he the way he described it was that the tabletop was dished. By
Was
a significant,
dished. Okay.
So it's in the
significant
center.
amount. Yeah.
So if it's dished like that, that's one solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it was caused, it's hard to say. If one side was finished, one side wasn't, and it's bowing toward the finished side, it means, in one sense, that the tabletop is getting more moist.
Right.
And it's expanding, but the top is not allowing to expand. Or depending on the grain, the ring orientation.
Yeah.
That will tell you if it's cupping.
Well, if it's live edged and it's got a joint down the middle, It sounds like, doesn't it?
Yeah, if they're book
It's
matched
book
or
matched.
split
Talks about a book match. Yeah.
That means the grain, the rings on one are facing up and the rings on the other are facing down, because it's book matched.
Yeah. I wouldn't think too much about it. My head is hurting already.
Yeah. I would rip it down the middle.
You do that?
Yeah.
and
resurface
reflatten
it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would do that because if he says it's what did he say? It was like a half-inch?
1 inch thick.
Inch thick.
No. But he said there was
quarter inch at the center.
quarter inch at
Yes.
the center. So if you rip it in half, you've just cut that in half to 1/8 of an inch.
Right.
Yeah.
So you won't have to do much flattening to get it back, and you might lose. It might be down to 7/8 of an inch or a little bit less after you do all that work.
Yeah. He was worried about the work he did on the Dutchman.
So the
but
Dutchmen are right down the middle.
he didn't say in the letter. I don't know where they are, but
Well, if they're not where you. Oh,
if he's got to flatten it, he's going to do some kind of
I
damage,
see,
perhaps to them.
yeah.
But I think when your desperate measures or desperate situation requires desperate solutions. So
Yeah. I wish we knew more about the construction of the piece, because then we might be able to also offer advice on how to avoid
how to
this
attach it.
problem in the future.
yeah, because like Mike said, it sounds like it's not fully supported or cinched down to its base, so it's allowing movement on the ends.
Right.
Right. I mean, a lot of natural edge slab furniture is built that way, like Nakashima style furniture. There's not a lot of support underneath the top to help keep it flat.
Yeah. Usually there is some cross member, whether it's sort of
Yes.
a stretcher or the top portion of a trestle end or something like that, which is acting as a cleat to keep it flat. I think most successful pieces of furniture have something extending almost the full width at either end of the top to help keep it flat.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on. This episode, we're adding a new segment to spice things up a little bit, and this will be our all-time favorite piece of furniture of all time this week. Hey, I got it right twice. I'm pretty impressed.
That's pretty awesome. Did you have to write it down or anything?
No, but it's on the camera right in front of me now, so I'm very, I'm glad I hired Ben. He's good.
It's a very low-tech teleprompter that we have over there. It's a printed piece of paper.
It's just the one line I never get right. It's
Yes.
awesome. So, do you want to start us off, Mike? Do you have an example that you want to chat about?
Sure. I mean, one piece that comes to mind that I really liked was actually really influential, not only in a lot of furniture I made for a long time and actually sort of still make to a certain extent, but it seemed to have influenced a lot of the furniture our readers make as well. It was a piece that was on the cover of I think it was a February 1994 issue of Fine Woodworking by Garrett Hack. It was this little, very light, delicate shaker-inspired, I guess a sideboard, something like that. There's multiple drawers. I believe the piece was in maple with
Pear?
Some birch or flame birch?
With-
Flame birch?
it was light. I'm going to say maple with pear drawer fronts.
Yes.
So contrasting drawer fronts. So what I liked about it is that it had sort of a somewhat traditional look to it. It turned legs, so very shaker inspired. But I think it was the first time where I had seen a traditional piece that also started to incorporate contrasting woods in a really sort of personal and contemporary design sensibility. So he wasn't replicating a shaker piece. He wasn't making modern furniture that had no correlation to anything that had been made before. It was someone who was very familiar with the traditional style, but also imparted his own personality into the piece. And one thing I didn't really appreciate at the time is that Garrett Hack is a master of building light. In fact, I think this piece was like, a light and sturdy case or something like that. But he taught me more than anybody else that you can go a lot thinner with components in a piece than you think you need to in order to still have a rigid and structurally sound piece, but visually go much, much lighter. So even though I wasn't aware of what I really liked when I first saw it was the contrast between the elements and that sort of personal creative style. What was more subtle, but I think just as important, and is probably presented a bigger lesson for me over the long run was really building light or building heavy, but really controlling the look of your piece by the scale of the elements within the piece itself. So beautiful piece on its own, and also just a great education in furniture design.
Yeah, although I wasn't born when that article came out.
Yes, you were.
That piece, I love that piece of furniture too. And in fact, when I interviewed for this job, Asa asked me about to name a couple of fine woodworking articles that were important to me, significant to me, and that was one of them, because that piece of furniture I still think is one of the most beautiful pieces that's been in the magazine throughout the history of the magazine.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
And it keeps coming back. When we do articles by Garrett in talking about his construction and design talk, that piece always comes back. It's iconic to me.
For me, in a way, I think it is that piece, and actually a lot of Garrett's design in general is quintessential fine woodworking. If there was a fine woodworking aesthetic, it would sort of be that grounded in tradition, but clearly contemporary, elegant, light.
With a personal touch.
With a personal touch.
Where you take
Yeah.
that traditional piece and you make it your own.
Yeah.
So do you
Cool.
want to hit us up, Matt?
Yeah, so my piece is something more recent. It was on the cover. No, I don't remember what cover issue it was. Mike probably does. Is it up on the wall there? There it is, issue 242. It's on the wall behind us. It's Andrew Hunter's Hutch. Yeah, that's what we're going to call it, a hutch. And it's a very beautiful piece made from eastern white pine for the case. And then the countertop on the hutch and also the top of the hutch are red oak. And what I really like about this piece is, one, I like it has a very, I don't know, it's like an elegant country feel to it. So it's clearly sort of country, but it's also very clean and modern.
I agree with that. Yeah,
Which I like a lot. So he's sort of taken a very American vernacular style of furniture, and instead of having lots of knotty pine and hearts cut into it and stuff, he's cleaned it up and given it a very modern feel.
Yeah, and he didn't stain it with walnut.
And he didn't stain it.
and he's also making this completely with hand tools,
Yes.
which
Yes.
you think also is related to traditional furniture design or historic reenactment or something. But he's taking traditional methods, traditional materials,
And
like
making-
you said, bringing a really contemporary sensibility to it. Like, just because you use old tools doesn't mean you have to make furniture that looks old.
Right. And it's also cool because it's a very clearly an American piece of furniture.
Yeah.
But it's all made with Japanese tools.
That's funny.
But what I also like about it, I love there's this vertical divider between the two doors on the bottom. And I just love how it comes down past the bottom of the piece and has this slight radius on it.
Yes.
And there's two little pegs in it to keep it on that the bottom of the case. And that's just fantastic. And the milk painted back, shiplap back, is milk painted, which is a really nice touch. Obviously I would like that. And just even the spindles up at the plate rack, the spindles aren't turned; they're not perfect circles. They're hand shaped, faceted spindles.
Yeah,
in
they're
red
like
oak.
riven from a piece of firewood or something.
Yes, yeah, riven. That's what they were. They weren't spoke shaved. I
Yeah.
don't think.
No, but he did spoke shave.
yeah,
But
he
after he
smoothed them
after he
Yeah.
so
arrived them.
split them out so the grain is like perfectly intact through the length of the spindles, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's nails there, but
Yep.
the nails are used in a very tasteful way to where they almost look like pegs. They're nails where you would expect pegs to be, like joinery.
Yeah.
So I think everything about it is it's wonderful. And it would look nice in just about any home nowadays.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
At a country cabin or a New York loft.
Yeah.
it really.
I really like this piece too, and I'm actually thinking of not making the entire piece, but I was looking at it in terms of just the lower portion as just a standalone cabinet.
It would look great.
The proportions are great, and like Matt talked about that rail or style rather extending down below the front. It's sort of like an architectural. I think it's is it a corbel or something? Is that what it's called?
Not a corbel.
But there or a pendant. There's some. It's a really a cool element that just. It's subtle. It's less than a quarter of an inch or about a quarter of an inch long, and it really stands out. So.
Obviously, I really love this piece as well. I agree 100%. And Andrew's design sensibility, is really quiet, and I really like that in furniture. I think it's why I like Garrett Hack's work. I like the work of James Krenov and other people, and it's nice. I think it takes a lot of courage to do things that are really simple, really plain, and still, but they still really have their own sense of style and personality. And I think the reason why that little detail you guys both pick up on is such a significant thing is because of the restraint that he's shown overall in the piece, where the more quiet a piece is, the more effect even subtle details can have in a piece.
Yeah, even the contrasting top of the case and the top of the work surface below, I think that's red oak.
Yeah, it's red oak. Yeah.
It's, it's very subtle, just like the milk paint in the background. It just kind of, it all flows together. It's really a sweet piece.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have something different. And what I've done, I mean, when I was thinking of design, I didn't have a whole lot of time to think about this, but I was on a photo shoot a couple of years ago with Dan Faya where he built a Bombay chest, and I was driving back and forth to New Hampshire to his shop, once a month or whatever the timing was. And he built this Bombay chest, and I know it's a period piece, but he took basically the traditional form, and he added his own small details. He did some fretwork at the top and some more details on the bottom. And I'm not a period furniture expert, so I'm not sure what the real differences are. But just in terms of watching him work, that's what sort of drew me to this piece. I mean, the fact that you've got all these curves in every different plane, and watching him fit the brass hardware, in the concave and convex sections of the drawer fronts, and then doing all the fretwork by hand, and just like with the stippling technique to add the texture in the recessed areas. To me, it's a classic design. And just watching him make it was just an amazing feat, and really just made me think, well, the period guys did have some pretty good chops to just make this thing. One of the other things that really drew me to it was not having ever seen someone take a big old fat chunk of wood and then just carve it into these curvaceous forms. And by doing so, you create these beautiful grain patterns on the side of the piece and on the front, and he's able to retain it even through the horizontal dividers in the work. It's just, to me, it's a master craftsman type piece.
Yeah, I really like on the front drawers, these were cut from solid wood, if I recall correctly, that because of the way they're cut and everything, you have what is sort of like the center of a bullseye in the second to the bottom. There's 4 drawers, and this would be in the second one from the bottom, and then that radiates out throughout all the drawers, and it's just this nice pattern that it creates on the front of, and it's a pattern that's very pleasing with a curve. I have to imagine you could have cut this out from boards in such a way that the pattern it created would not be pleasing.
Right.
But Dan did a wonderful job with that grain on the front.
Yeah, and on
drawers.
it's the same on the sides. One of the things that Dan did, I mean, he basically spared no expense, but he got some huge wide boards, and I can't remember what lumberyard it came from, but that's
he
how
doesn't want you to tell anybody either.
Exactly. That's how he was able to create the wonderful grain. Was he had big, fat, wide boards, and he just chopped them down and carved a masterpiece, like I said.
Yeah, I mean, everything from controlling the grain to the overall workmanship to the carving details. Really, it's someone who has mastered the medium and is really working with the quintessential understanding of the medium in which he works. And it's just, I don't care whether it's clay or oil paint or architecture, Dan is a true master of his craft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing we did not mention that we should mention is that those of you who are watching the video right now are seeing these pieces flash before you on the screen. But if you're listening, you can go to our website where the individual pages for this particular episode of the podcast, and there will be photos of these pieces there to look at.
Yep. Now that we have a web producer who's, churning out and working out.
And not
it's
Ed.
A good thing. Yeah,
Ed was terrible.
Anyway, all right.
We miss Ed.
Let's wrap it up. We do miss Ed, even if he has to wear khakis. That's it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Tune in again in 2 weeks on February 12th for our next episode. Meanwhile, if you have any woodworking questions, send them as well as your comments to shoptalk@taunton.com. Spread the word about Shop Talk Live. Matt's pointing to something that I don't know what he's pointing to.
Nothing. Go ahead. We'll talk about it later.
All right. Spread the word about Shop Talk Live. Hook us up with your woodworking friends by any means necessary, including Twitter and Facebook. And you can catch the podcast via iTunes. And while you're there, please give us the all-powerful 5-star rating. You can also stream the podcast on the web at www.shoptalklive.com or catch us on iHeartRadio. Thanks for listening and have fun in the shop. See you next time, guys.
I think that the former owners used it as an abattoir, perhaps.
What?
Yeah, look it up later, boys.
We'll have to have Ben put that definition on the website for us.
Abattoir. Noun. A slaughterhouse. Contemporary examples. The abattoir was being used as a distribution plant for the meat of cattle slaughtered outside the city. Abattoir.